All right, get ready, because today we're diving deep into a case from Scotland that really shook things up back in the late 1960s.
The murder of Maxwell Garvie.
That's right, you sent over a ton of stuff.
A whole bunch.
News articles, a Wikipedia page, and even pieces of a book.
It's quite the collection.
All about this infamous Maxwell Garvie case.
Absolutely.
So we're going to unpack this whole thing together.
Yeah.
We'll look at not just the crime itself,
Right.
but also like the social context of the time.
Definitely.
And how Sheila Garvie
Maxwell's wife.
exactly was portrayed by the media.
Yeah, it's particularly interesting because you can really look at the Garvie case and see how society, especially back then, viewed women who maybe pushed those traditional boundaries a bit.
Exactly. It's like a total time capsule, right?
Yeah.
To set the scene, we're in Aberdeenshire, Scotland,
Okay.
during the swinging 60s,
Right.
and Maxwell Garvie, he was a wealthy farmer,
Mm-hmm.
was living what seemed like a pretty enviable life.
Yeah.
He had a beautiful farmhouse, drove flashy cars,
Fancy.
even owned a private plane.
Oh, wow.
And he and Sheila, they had 3 children.
Okay.
And, on the surface, their life seemed picture perfect.
It's important to remember, though,
Okay.
that this image of a successful, respectable farmer,
Right.
it was really carefully cultivated.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a stark contrast to what we now know was going on behind the scenes.
That's right, because Maxwell had this whole hidden side to him.
Yeah.
As the 60s went on, even in rural Scotland, Maxwell went through this dramatic transformation.
Oh, really?
It seems like he shifted from enjoying like the finer things in life
Oh, okay.
to getting involved in, well, let's just say the less conventional side of the era.
And see, we can see this shift
Yeah.
reflected in how he was acting.
Oh, okay.
He starts hosting these gatherings at their farmhouse.
Right.
Nudism, swapping partners, even orgies.
Oh, wow.
People started calling their home Kinky Cottage.
No way, really?
Yeah, the locals did.
That's wild. That's a huge departure from that image he tried to put out there.
Yeah, a far cry from the respectable farmer, right?
It really is. And from what we've read,
Yeah.
it seems like Sheila's participation in all of this
Oh, okay.
was far from voluntary.
So you're saying Maxwell was coercive?
It seems that way, pushing her into these situations.
You can already see that power imbalance, can't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then into this already kind of complicated situation walks Brian Tevendale, a young guy really initially brought in by Maxwell himself.
That's where things get really interesting, huh?
This is where it gets good.
From what I've read, this isn't like just a straightforward affair, is it?
Oh, no, not at all.
What happened?
Sources suggest Maxwell was pulling the strings,
Oh, wow.
not just orchestrating the affair between Sheila and Brian,
Okay.
but he'd even use like coin tosses.
No way.
Yeah, to decide who was going to sleep with Sheila.
Seriously. That's a little creepy, isn't it? That coin toss thing is just, I don't know. It's chilling. It's like he's reducing her to just a piece in his game.
Yeah, just an object in his twisted little game.
Exactly. It's a really disturbing power dynamic.
Totally.
And just when you think it couldn't get more complicated,
Wait for it.
Maxwell was also involved with Brian's sister,
Oh, really?
Trudy Burst.
Trudy Burst, the policeman's wife.
That's her, so now we've got this whole tangled web of relationships and infidelity.
It's a mess.
Makes you wonder what was going through everyone's minds.
Right. It's crucial to keep in mind
Yeah.
that all of this was happening behind this facade of respectability.
Okay.
This was 1960 Scotland, right?
Right.
Social expectations for women were a lot different back then.
Oh, I bet.
A woman like Sheila stepping outside of those expectations,
Right.
especially in such a dramatic way,
Yeah.
she would have been judged so harshly.
It's hard to imagine the pressure she must have been under.
Yeah,
On one hand, this image of a happy couple.
right.
On the other, she's trapped in this whole situation.
And according to some sources,
Oh, yeah.
Sheila tried to leave Maxwell
Really?
multiple times
No.
even. And they say Maxwell responded with threats.
Oh, no.
Threats of violence.
That's terrible.
Shows you the level of control he had over her.
And the danger she was in?
Exactly.
So was she a willing participant in Maxwell's lifestyle?
Like, he probably wanted people to believe,
Right.
or was she a victim, of his manipulation and abuse?
That seems to be the big question, doesn't it?
The question at the very heart of this case.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
And then a little while later,
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell just vanishes.
Gone. No trace.
Was there any suspicion of foul play at first?
It's interesting because
Yeah.
it seems like Maxwell was kind of spontaneous, you know?
He did have that private plane.
Right. So initially,
Yeah.
it was treated like a missing person case.
Makes sense.
He was known to take off in his plane on a whim, no warning. So nobody really thought much of it at first.
Okay.
But then 3 months later, Sheila confesses to her mother
About what?
about Brian being involved in Maxwell's disappearance.
And that's what sets everything in motion, right?
Yeah, it's the catalyst.
What happens next?
Well, Sheila's mom,
Yeah,
she gets worried
of course.
for the safety of her grandkids, you know. So
Sure.
she goes to the police.
And they bring Brian in for questioning.
Exactly, under pressure.
What does he do?
He cracks,
Oh, boy.
leads them straight to a horrifying discovery.
This is where we find out what happened to Maxwell, right?
Yep, guided by Brian's confession.
Okay.
The police find Maxwell's body,
Wow.
hidden away in this tunnel at Lauriston Castle.
Seriously. A castle? That's straight out of a movie.
I know, right? It's crazy.
It's no wonder this case blew up in the media.
Oh, absolutely.
This seemingly normal farmer leading this secret life
Yeah.
vanishes, and then boom, his body's found in a castle tunnel.
The press went wild,
I bet they did.
reporting all the dirty details of the Garvie's lifestyle,
Sensationalizing it all.
painting Sheila as this cold, manipulative femme fatale.
That image really stuck with her, didn't it?
Oh, it did.
It's hard to separate her from that portrayal.
You have to remember,
Mhm.
this was 1960s Scotland.
Yeah,
Society had very different expectations for women back then.
definitely.
A woman like Sheila,
Right.
straying so far from the norm,
Yeah.
she would have been judged so harshly.
And then, of course, there's the trial.
Ah, the trial.
That's where it all comes to a head, doesn't it?
It becomes this battle of narratives.
Oh.
You have Sheila claiming she was just an innocent bystander,
Oh.
caught up in Maxwell and Brian's mess.
Right.
Then you have Brian
Yeah.
pointing the finger right back at Sheila,
Saying what?
saying she was the mastermind behind it all.
Wow, so she's either totally innocent
Right.
or the puppet master.
Pretty much.
And we can't forget Alan Peters,
Oh, yeah. Brian's friend.
the one who helped hide the body.
That's him.
What was his story?
Claimed both Sheila and Brian were responsible,
And he just happened to be there.
but insisted he was innocent, of course.
So 3 completely different stories.
A real tangled web.
Must have been difficult for the jury to figure out what really happened.
It was a tough one.
A lot of the evidence against Sheila was circumstantial, right?
Yeah, a lot of it.
What about the life insurance policy?
That was a big one.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What was the story there?
Well, the prosecution brought up that Sheila stood to gain
From Maxwell's death,
a lot of money. Yeah.
how much are we talking?
Over £55,000.
That's a fortune, especially back then.
It was a huge sum.
And then there's the farm, the cars, all the investments.
Exactly. They painted Sheila as this greedy woman,
Okay.
seeing Maxwell's death as her ticket to a better life.
But knowing what we know about Maxwell,
Yeah.
his controlling behavior, Sheila trying to leave,
Mm-hmm.
could that life insurance money have been about something else?
Like what?
Escaping a dangerous situation.
Interesting point.
Not just getting rich.
It's a crucial question. You have to remember, domestic abuse, coercive control.
Right.
These things weren't really understood back in the 1960s.
Right.
It's possible the jury didn't grasp what a victim of abuse might do,
To protect themselves.
even if it meant doing something extreme.
It seems like the femme fatale image
Yeah.
and the lack of understanding about abuse could have really swayed the jury.
It's very possible.
So what happened?
Well, despite the conflicting stories
Yeah.
and the circumstantial evidence,
Right.
both Sheila and Brian were found guilty of murder.
What was their sentence?
Life in prison.
Wow. But they didn't serve life, did they?
No, they ended up serving 10 years,
Okay.
released in 1978.
And what about Alan Peters?
He was acquitted
Really?
with a not proven verdict.
Not proven. What does that even mean?
It's unique to the Scottish legal system.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the jury thinks the defendant might be guilty,
Okay.
but they don't have enough solid evidence.
Like a middle ground between guilty and not guilty.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That adds a whole other layer to this case.
It does, doesn't it?
But the story doesn't end there.
Oh, no, not even close.
Years later, Brian Tevendale makes a confession.
He does.
Tell me everything.
In a newspaper interview, he admitted to firing the fatal shot.
The shot that killed Maxwell.
The one and only. But he also maintained that Sheila was the mastermind.
So he takes responsibility for pulling the trigger.
Right.
But still implicates Sheila as the one who planned it all.
Exactly.
Does this change how we view her?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Was she manipulating him?
Or was she desperate, pushed to the edge by an abusive husband? It's a question that people are still debating.
It's tough.
Ryan admitting to shooting Maxwell, it sheds light on, like, the actual act.
Right.
But it doesn't tell us why Sheila did what she did.
Yeah.
Or how much of it was because of Maxwell's abuse.
It's a real ethical puzzle, isn't it?
Cool.
Trying to get inside her head, figure out what she was thinking.
And what led her down that path.
Did she manipulate Brian? Or was she just desperate to escape?
We might never know for sure.
It also shows how the legal system, especially back then, wasn't equipped to handle these kinds of cases.
Domestic abuse cases are so complex.
Right.
Back then, people didn't really get the dynamics of abuse.
Or how victims might react.
Exactly.
What happened to Sheila and Brian after they got out of prison?
Their lives took very different paths.
Really?
Brian became a pub landlord.
Okay.
He actually passed away from a heart attack in 2003.
Oh, wow.
Sheila, she remarried.
How many times?
Twice.
Wow. And she even ran a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, can you imagine?
From kinky cottage to a B&B.
What a change.
It is. Sadly, though, she spent her last years battling Alzheimer's.
Yeah, it's a tragic end to a life full of so much upheaval.
It is. But even after all this time,
Yeah.
the Garvie case still fascinates people, doesn't it?
Holy.
Like we're still trying to unravel it.
It's a mystery.
In recent years, people have been looking at Sheila's role in a new light.
Yeah, considering the impact of coercive control.
And domestic abuse.
Those are concepts that weren't well understood back then.
Makes you wonder how things might have played out differently.
If this happened today.
Exactly, with what we know now about abuse.
How it affects people psychologically.
Could the outcome have been different for Sheila?
It's possible. Maybe even likely.
Looking back now, do you think the system failed her?
It's definitely worth considering.
If people had been more aware of domestic abuse...
Back in the 1960s, Sheila might have been seen as a victim.
Driven to a desperate act.
Instead of a scheming manipulator.
It's impossible to know for sure.
But it's a question that lingers.
It really makes you think.
It does.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening.
Glad to hear it.
You've really shed light on all the nuances of this case.
It's been my pleasure.
It's amazing how, even though this was decades ago, the issues it raises are still relevant today.
Absolutely. Domestic abuse.
Societal expectations.
The complexities of human behavior.
It's all still so important.
The Garvie case shows us that there's always more to the story.
Then meets the eye.
It challenges our assumptions.
Makes us think about how societal pressures shape our views.
On justice, on guilt, on everything.
This deep dive has been incredible. Thanks for all your insights.
Anytime. Always happy to delve into these cases.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep exploring this case.
Yeah. Form your own opinions.
Read those articles, the Wikipedia page, the book excerpts.
Consider every angle.
And as you do, we'll leave you with this thought.
Okay.
What if they'd never found Maxwell Garvie's body?
Interesting question.
How would the story have been told?
Right.
How would we remember Sheila Garvie?
It's something to ponder.
Sometimes it's those unanswered questions
Yeah.
that stick with us the most.
They make us examine our own beliefs.
Our biases.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Garvie case.
Another one for the books.
We'll be back soon with another captivating story.
Yeah, wait.
Until then, keep exploring and keep asking those tough questions.
Stay curious out there.